Breaking the Fourth Wall is brought to you by InvestComics.com and Famous Faces and Funnies in West Melbourne, Florida. Thanks for listening. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Breaking the Fourth Wall special interview episode. What episode are we on now? Episode 8, I guess? 8, 9? I don't know. It all runs together after a while. Anyway, this episode we have a very special guest. We have the living legend, Norm Breyfogle. Is it Breyfogle? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's correct.
Oh, awesome. I always pronounced it Breyfogle growing up. I don't know why. Maybe it was Breyer's ice cream got in my head. I don't know.
A lot of people do. I answer to either one, but I usually correct people.
Okay, good. So Norm Breyfogle is our guest. Norm has a lot of history in comics, and he's also, you're currently working on what, Batman Beyond? Is that what you're working on now? Anyway, welcome to the show, Norm. We're very glad to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So we're going to go over a little bit of everything. For our younger readers, or younger listeners, we're going to maybe talk about a little of your history in comics. You've done a lot of great stuff over the years, and we also want to touch on, like Batman Beyond, anything else you might be currently doing, or any future plans you might have. So you want to give us maybe a quick rundown of some of your more famous stuff that you're more known for in the industry?
Well, chiefly I'm probably known most for Batman, for various Batman titles. Our first Batman title I drew on a regular basis was Detective Comics, and then I switched over to Batman and Shadow of the Bat, all with Alan Grant as my chief writer, with a few exceptions and a few issues. And so it was a total of about 6 or 7 years, including special projects on Batman. And then there was, before that, though, I was drawing Whisper for First Comics. That was my first monthly title in comics. And after Batman, I moved to Malibu's Ultraverse and drew their flagship title, Prime. At the tail end of that, as part of my deal to draw Prime, I also wrote and illustrated my own 6-issue miniseries, Metaphysique. And that's one of the projects I'm most proud of, just because I own it and I wrote it, and it was my first large-scale writing that I had ever had published. After that, boy, I wish I had my resume in front of me. I did a lot of stuff after that. The first thing after that would be Anarchy. I went back to DC, and it was right during the crash of the industry, and there weren't a lot of jobs to be had, and people who had jobs were hanging on for dear life. And the only thing that DC could offer me was Anarchy. And I had to kind of talk Alan Grant into it a little bit because he didn't think Anarchy was a strong enough character to hold its own title. It turned out to be right, but we did get almost 2 full years of work out of it. And I'm really proud of that work, and Alan is too.
I love that book. I'm a huge fan of the Anarchy character and that book. And it's a shame that it didn't finish out. I think you had a miniseries and then it turned into an ongoing, right?
Well, one good thing about it ending, yeah, that's true. It was a 4-issue miniseries, and there was a monthly title after that, and I think we got up to issue 9 or so. The one good thing about it being canceled is that we established that Anarchy was probably the Joker's son.
Oh, wow.
And that was actually my idea when DC was asking us to come up with some new ideas for some of the issues. That was my favorite one. Denny O'Neil didn't really like the idea, but he allowed it to go forward as long as we were going to prove that it wasn't Anarchy, that Anarchy was not the Joker's son in a later issue. But before we could do that, the series was canceled. So as it stands, Anarchy is the Joker's son.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how would you feel if they brought that back out? If they went back to that idea, like in the current New 52, how would you feel about that? Would you be glad to see that happen?
Well, for all I know, they've already. I'm not in touch with everything that DC is publishing. I haven't been for like 10 years now, so I don't really know. As far as I know, as far as I know, they may very well have already negated that fact.
Oh, really?
I don't know.
It's hard to keep up with all the New 52 and everything being kind of erased and started over. They did keep a lot of the Batman universe intact to a certain extent, but it's really hard to figure out what there's so much Batman history. Obviously, you were such a big part of it too. You also did the Ventriloquist and Mr. Zsasz, and you had a big chunk of Batman history there, and I'm just curious. It is kind of curious how much of that's still intact, or to what extent is it still intact.
Well, it's kind of a fake reality to say whether or not it's still intact, because first of all, it's all imaginary stories.
Yeah,
and all those issues. It's not like everybody burned all the past issues.
True.
And as far as we know, the New 52 could all be a dream. We don't know. That could be a step. So they could decide to just reverse it. I don't think they will, of course.
Probably not.
And I'm getting used to things like, getting used to. I've only read the first issue of all of the new 52 titles, each of the new 52 titles, and I didn't really see any problem with it. The artwork's good. At first, the costume changes grated on me a little bit as a fan.
Yeah.
But the more I look at them and the more I draw them, I am actually drawing them in a project that I can't talk about.
Oh, nice.
And I'm getting used to the costume designs, and I can see that they're, in a lot of ways, they're necessary improvements. You know, getting rid of the short shorts over tights, we're all really used to that, so it's like iconic for us. But once you start really getting used to the idea of not having that element as part of the costume design, it proves itself to be better. I went through the same thing with the Robin change back in the 1990s when along with a bunch of other artists, were asked by DC to redesign Robin, and they ended up going with Neil Adams' costume design with a few elements that I put in too. But when I was originally asked, or before that was even requested of us, I always thought that Robin had a cool costume because it was a boy's costume and it was a bright costume as opposed to Batman's dark costume. It all seemed to work for me because I grew up with it and everything. But once I started redesigning it, it was obvious that it had to be redesigned. I mean, chainmail shorts.
Chainmail was big for a long time back then. You had a lot of chainmail outfits going on.
Chainmail. And there's no other chainmail on his body, just on his shorts. It's kind of weirdly bringing attention to a certain specific part of his anatomy. And then he's got what look like bare legs, and those little Peter Pan booties.
Yeah.
It really needed to be redesigned. I think the same thing is true of pretty much for the rest of the Justice League and all the other superhero characters. They needed some redesign. Some of them didn't really need it as much as others. Some of them are really kind of arbitrary. I mean, I think the Flash's costume was fine as it was, and they've really changed it very little. They've only added a little bit of what they call piping or seams or whatever.
Yeah.
But, they're still recognizable as the original characters, and I'm kind of rambling on about this.
No, it's all good. It's an interesting topic. I mean, there was a lot of, when New 52 came out, you kind of had a split. You had people that have been fans for a long time. Like, I've been reading for about 25 years, and so I've seen, I love the old stuff, but also I see the point where you have to modernize some stuff, because if you want to get in new readers, you really have to be able to touch base with new readers, and some of the older classic designs just don't appeal to newer readers or to younger kids now. And I think you're right, some of it probably was necessary. Some of them, though, you had the Wonder Woman uproar with the pants, the Wonder Woman pants versus the classic Wonder Woman outfit, and they tried to do that, and then that didn't do very well. So I guess they kind of went back to I don't know if it's quite the classic, not really the classic, but kind of a close version of the classic.
It's pretty darn close. It's basically the same thing. It's like if any artist took some artistic license with the classic costume. Mm-hmm. This is what you'd have. So it's really not really much of a change at all, if anything. There's a little bit more lines on the red part, and there's some added stars on the side of her thorax, on the side of her torso, in red. But that's really the only real difference. Mm-hmm. Her bracelets were changed a little bit too, but they're still bracelets. I mean, what's the difference,
Yeah, and they actually brought. I know you said you haven't been reading the current really all the way up, but I don't know if you know much about the current Wonder Woman. Brian Azzarello's writing. He actually brought the bracelets into a reason she has them, basically.
I didn't read that.
Yeah, they didn't come out and say it, but they kind of show that it's like an inhibitor almost. That like she was fighting somebody, and they're like, "Oh, you have bracelets," and she's like, that's for your benefit, and she snaps them off, and she just whoops ass. Like, it's pretty awesome. Like, I thought it was kind of neat that they...
What, do they have, like, some kind of a magical charm on them or something? How do they inhibit her?
I don't know. They didn't really go into it. It just...
Are they really, really heavy, so she can't move as fast when she's wearing them?
I guess so. I don't know. I mean, she still uses them, blocking bullets and stuff, and then there's that one story, she snaps them off. And, I mean, they're really doing a lot with her. Like, the new series really goes into a lot of the Greek myth stuff, but in a modern twist to it, modernizes a lot of the gods. And it shows how she can fly, because that was a touching point. A lot of people were like, "Oh, how can Wonder Woman fly?" Like, it actually has Hermes plucks a feather out and throws it at her, and it hits her and gives her the power of flight. To help her out, she needed to fly at that time, and he lets her fly. So it kind of,
with their mythological connections, maybe the explanation for the bracelets is a magical thing. Then,
yeah, I think Hephaestus made the bracelets for her. I think they mentioned that. They don't really go into a whole lot of detail. Not that I can remember. I should go back and read that, because it was kind of an interesting point. But Yeah, we're really digressing here, but that's okay, though. I think it's interesting.
I don't know if they brought Anarchy back or not. They probably haven't had the time. I don't know if they ever will into the new 52. It'd be interesting to see if they change it at all. I'm sure Alan would not be happy with any changes they make on Anarchy.
Probably not.
Alan, even though he created it for DC, he feels a certain understandable proprietary quality to Anarchy. I mean, he put a lot of his heart and soul into Anarchy.
Well, I think it's a beautifully designed character. I love the costume. I love the mask. I love it. I think it's just a well designed character. And I think if they mess with it too much, you're really gonna damage the character if you change it too much.
It's a pretty easy costume. It's a pretty striking and easy costume to put together for Halloween too.
Yes, I've thought about that actually.
Plain face mask and then just spray painted gold. And you got that, and then you can find a hat that pretty much matches it. Doesn't even have to be a red costume. If it's the gold face mask and you're in black, because I kind of drew it as though it was dark red, it still looks like Anarchy. And then you just find a cane. It's really simple.
Well, see, I should have thought of that before. We just we live in Melbourne, Florida, on the east coast of Florida, and we have a zombie walk, which is really popular now. And we also had our first supervillain walk. Had a few hundred people show up, and they did some raffle for charity and stuff, and people dressed up. So I think that would be kind of a neat character to do. I don't know if you're aware, they brought ventriloquist back.
Pardon me?
They brought the ventriloquist back.
They did already in the 52?
It's about, I don't know if it's out yet or if it's about to come out. It's a female ventriloquist, though.
I heard about that, but I don't know anything about it beyond that.
Yeah, I was gonna see if you knew about that or what you thought about it. Are you okay with it?
Is the dummy still Al Capone type, or is it a female?
I don't know. The only thing I really saw art-wise was like the cover, and it looked kind of shadowed. Like it was just like I think she was holding a dummy. I didn't really get to see a lot of the details. I saw it online. I'm not even sure if it's out yet. I think it's coming soon. But I'm kind of curious to see what they do with it because that's a pretty iconic character, also. And
I would be interested in that too, obviously for obvious reasons. I stopped following the DC titles when they stopped hiring me, basically around 2001, right after the Spectre 2002, and I stopped getting the monthly titles, complimentary copies, and that's when they stopped sending out complimentary copies of everything too. Which is too bad because I don't really have a good comic store in my little small populated out of the way area up here, and I would be probably following a lot more of the stuff if I did.
Yeah.
Or if I got the complimentary copies, I would definitely follow it. But even when I was getting all those way back in 2002, I think was the last time I got complimentary copies, and DC was basically sending out almost everything that they printed, except for maybe the hardbound graphic novels, and it was so much information even then. That I was getting it free. Even when I was getting it free, I couldn't really read it all. But at least I would read parts of it, and I could keep my eyes on it and see what was going on. Now, the only time I do that, I see both your cats behind you now.
Oh, they're both there? Awesome. There's one up there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're both hanging out.
Now, the only way I keep in touch with the industry is either online or when I go to conventions, I'll pick up some issues. Like, that's when I picked up the hardbound copy of all of the New 52, which is a really thick book. It's like $200.
Oh, wow.
I actually traded a sketch for it.
Oh, nice. See, that's great, man. Using barter, that's awesome. I also when I've been a comics fan forever, and I kind of got out of it for a little bit. I just back when they were doing, I guess it was back in about mid 2000s when they started just flooding the market with all kinds of stuff, and I was just like, it's just too much. I was spending basically a mortgage payment a month worth of for comics every month, and I was like, I'm getting too into this. So I got back in a couple of years ago, and I've always been more of a DC fan than anything else. So I started with the New 52. I was reading a little bit before that, but I was like, this is a great starting point again. And I bought all the number one issues, and then pick and chose from there what I was going to stick with. I'm still reading a good chunk of them. I find myself reading more independent stuff now than anything else, but it is. You're right. It's hard to keep up with, man. There's a lot out there, and
well, then there's also the added element of the fact that I draw comics all day long. When I got time off, I don't have that much. I don't have the kind of interest I had as a fan to enjoy comics on the side because it's my job now.
Yeah. Do you really keep up with anything? Not just DC, but are there any books out there you're currently reading, or is it just something strikes your fancy at a convention, you grab it, or?
And beyond, I read every issue.
I would hope so.
That's about it, though. No.
Well, I guess you could just do it the other way. You could just draw whatever you wanted and have whoever script whatever they wanted to around it. I guess the reverse Marvel bullpen way from back in the day. Just
Well, even then, they at least had a plot first.
Yeah, that's true. It's true.
Sometimes what I've read is that Kirby would just get a basic idea, not even a full full plot, and then he would just draw up a whole story. And then Stan Lee would just write in the story.
That's what I heard, too. I've seen a couple of...
like a springboard first, and then Kirby was largely involved in creating the plot as well.
Yeah, a few months back, an original page from Kirby came up. I think it was on, a Fantastic Four page, maybe. I'm not quite sure. And it came up, and it had, it was a big one because it actually had notes from Stan Lee in the, along the borders, where I guess he'd given the plot, handed him the page, and was like, here, draw it, and they just went back and forth and just like handed each other the work and worked off of it. So it was kind of interesting. And of course, that page was way out of my price range, and I couldn't grab it. But
yeah, we couldn't do that today. Everything's too the storylines and the characters. Everything's too interrelated and much more complex. You wouldn't be able to get away with that now.
Yeah, but continuity is always a hot button issue with comics people now. So there have already been some issues with DC where they're trying to keep a good continuity, and people are catching. Nowadays you can't let anything slip, man. Somebody will catch. If there's one little thing, there's somebody out there that's going to find it, post it on the internet, and it's there forever. So yeah, there's a lot of issues with the 5-year timeline in DC right now, which is it's hard to smash in 70, 75 years worth of continuity into roughly 5 years backstory and 1.5 years worth of books.
Well, my fan days are basically way gone, way past, and I'm still really in touch with them in my heart. My days were in the 70s when I was a really big fan. That's when I was reading anything that had good artwork, really, is what it was. Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't have been reading comics if the artwork wasn't good, because I was attracted initially to the artwork. But the stories became important to me. So my era was the 70s. So, Kurt Swan, Murphy Anderson on Superman, Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams, Jim Perro, Dick Giordano on Batman. But that's the kind of comics that I still think of as my favorites. And I know that it's just all colored with the glow of my childhood years, and I would feel very differently if I was a fresh comics fan now. I feel differently about the animated TV shows, too. When I was a kid, the animated TV shows we had for, the Super Friends and stuff like that was pretty darn lame. Even as a kid, I knew it was lame. And I always wanted better artwork. And now we've had for 20 years now, really great animated TV shows.
That is true.
And yet I don't feel the same kind of excitement about them as I did when I was a kid. Even though the artwork is much better, it's more like what I would have wanted. I guess I don't have those fresh eyes anymore. Well,
I can relate to that because I was born in 1977, so I got started in comics in the early 80s, and I really hit my love of them in the late 80s. Like I remember one of the books I first bought with my own money when I was about 13 was your Batman 457. The one with Scarecrow on the cover and Batman hanging upside down with the spiders all over him and Robin coming in the window, the silhouette. Right. I remember that book. That's one of the most striking covers ever. Plus, I'm scared shitless of spiders, so it terrified me. And
many of us are. I am too.
So I remember buying that book. I used to go to this little grocery store by my grandmother's house, and they had like a spinner rack, which you don't see anymore at all either. And they had single issues, and they had these 3-packs, and they would be like a Batman 3-pack, and throw Batman and Detective in. And I remember that was one of the 3-pack, and that's the reason I bought that, was that cover. I was like, holy shit, that looks great. I got to get that. And I've always loved stuff that was before my time. I love Silver Age stuff. Like you said, I love Kurt Swan, and I love Neil Adams. Like, I think that stuff really appeals. And you've got modern artists that have their own touch and their own style, and some of it's very crisp, and just the coloring methods they use nowadays is just amazing. You get such bright, crisp colors and stuff like that. But you can't beat some of the art from back then, man. It was beautiful, and it was very stylistic, and it was amazing. Going through some of the old Captain Marvel books from even way before that, some of that art was incredible too. I think it's out there, and if you've got the right kind of comic reader, then they're still going to really feel for that kind of book, which is good. And that kind of leads into something else that we talked about.
Good artwork is good artwork, no matter what it's drawn on. Even if it's just a stick drawing in the sand, you'd still tell the difference if it's a good drawing or not.
Oh, agreed.
So that's the way I've always felt about it. Now, a lot of fans, probably the majority of fans, aren't really into the artwork so much per se. They're more like into the concepts. They're more like into the entertainment, and so they're less judgmental about the specific quality of drawing as somebody like I would. That's what it actually brings up a slight pet peeve of mine. That is the fact that digital coloring is so intense now, and it has been all along, of course, that it tends to overpower the black and white line work, so that, frankly, the black and white line work could easily be a lot more simplified and would still not look that much different to a majority or a large amount of eyes to something that that is much better or much worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a Neil Adams could carry a strip entirely with very simple coloring or no coloring at all. But a lot of the artists some of the artists that are drawing comics these days can get by without being as good as Adams and still achieve a real following because they got all this other computer technology backing them up, you know?
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I can see that. And you don't see a whole lot of just bare bones artwork anymore. Somebody was talking the other day that they, I can't remember what the book was. One of the books is the current Green Arrow that just got taken over by, I believe Jeff Johns is writing it now. He picked it up at issue 17 because it wasn't doing very well. With, the Arrow TV show has got people hyped on that character, so he kind of took it to that story. It really kind of goes hand in hand almost with that TV show. And there are cut panels along the story that are black and white and kind of stark. And there was some other, I can't remember off the top of my head what the other book was, but it actually had some non-inked art on the pages. Like it was just straight pencils.
Cool.
For effect, which I think is kind of cool.
That brings up another idea. Even though we've got all this computer technology, and when it comes to publishing in comics, we seem to have less variety. When I was a teenager in the 70s, there were these oversized, creepy horror Conan books that were in black and white, Vampirella, with a wide range of old school techniques. Pencils, ink wash, pen and ink, all kinds of stuff. Now it's all pen and ink with computer coloring in it.
Yeah.
Basically, that's it. And we've lost a lot of variety. Even though we've got so much more technology, we seem to be, narrowing the focus.
Yeah, that's true.
And of course, that brings in a whole other element, and that is the economic pressures of the world today. Publishers comics concepts, and any kind of business is more pressured to increase the bottom line every month, if possible. And so when they find a formula that works, they try to force everybody to follow that. Now, there was always some of that. I remember Jack Kirby, when he moved over to DC in 1976 or something like that, he was asked to draw like Kurt Swan, and they actually changed Kirby's Superman faces when he drew Superman for a little while to make it look more like Kurt Swan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
God, I can't even imagine having Kirby draw like Kurt Swan. That's a completely alien concept to me. Like, I love both of those guys so much, and I can't imagine trying to make one ape the other. That's
or even Neil Adams when he splashed onto the scene in the 60s. I remember reading that and hearing face to face with some older pros later, many decades later, that they were being asked to draw like Neil Adams, and some of them resented the bar being raised so high.
Wow. I mean, I guess if you're
in a lot of ways, in a lot of other ways too. I mean, right now the New 52, it seems like so many of them, or even for the last 15, 20 years, so many comics artists have been pressured to draw like in the image style.
Yeah.
Jim Lee has had as much of an impact practically as Neil Adams did way back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And my attitude has always been, well, when I was a kid, I loved Neil Adams. And yet I still saw quality in other people's works, and so it wasn't like I was narrowly focused on Adams. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that way, but then again, I'm an artist. I was trying to draw even as a kid, so maybe I was focused on it than others.
I agree with the image style, the Jim Lee, the Todd McFarlane, that hyper-active, just super, super uber detailed stuff is really popular, and there are some artists out there that don't follow that are very popular but very polarizing. Like, I don't know if you follow much of Mike Allred's art. That guy, I think he's fantastic, and he harkens back to me the Silver Age kind of style. His stuff is very, very stylized, and most people I talk to, he is a love him or hate him artist, and I think he's amazing. His wife actually does his coloring. I'm sure she's using some kind of digital techniques, but her color is just incredibly bright and vivid, and really goes well with his art style. But I know people that just won't read him, and I love it. But but he's very stylized and not of that image style like you mentioned, and I think that it's a shame, but that I think that maybe affects some of his sales. There are people out there that I know that just will not give his books, like he's doing FF right now for Marvel. They won't give his books a chance, and because of that, and it's a shame because fantastic.
There are a lot of forces that maybe were around affecting comics that maybe were around when I was a kid, but they're a lot stronger now, and there are some new forces as well. This goes into what Jerry Ordway was talking about.
The ageism in comics essay he wrote recently.
Yeah, not just that, but also why that ageism exists, and narrow focus to try to reject classical work and try to focus on what is definitely more likely to sell, even though publishers and editors don't really know what's going to sell. They're always stabbing in the dark.
Yeah.
And it's a feedback loop too, and comics are such a small market that feedback loop is very vicious, and so it's a shame that there isn't a wider market for comics, and therefore there could be a lot more variety. But there are other forces than just personal taste in drawing. We have competing entertainment forces now. Computer games. Now comics are even competing against themselves with the movies.
That's true.
Yeah. And
you see a lot of it. You see, like one of the most stark examples of that, I think, is the Avengers. Avengers have always been characters I've loved. It's always been a concept I've liked, even though I've been more of a DC guy. I like that team aspect, And then they had the movie, which was a fantastic movie. I loved it. And now you see the comics coming out of it now. A couple of their books are obviously tailored around the moviegoer. You get...
that happened first on Batman, so yeah, I'm really well familiar with that. When I was working on Batman, after the first Batman movie, we were all told to start drawing Gotham City like the Anton Furst designs. In fact, they sent us packets of high-quality prints of the Anton Furst designs.
Oh, wow, really?
And then, even though I'd been drawing a lot of different Batmobiles and I kind of settled on my own Batmobile, we were all told to draw the same Batmobile, too. That was in the movies.
Oh,
so that was the first time that really happened, probably, in comics.
I had no idea. That's really awesome.
It's right there.
Now, is that something that you... I'm sure you were a little peeved about that. I've got my Batmobile.
Well, maybe a little peeved. I wasn't really peeved, per se. I understood it.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that it was going to become more and more of an impact. I didn't realize that movies would be impacting comics and narrowing the focus. I've always felt that variety is good. I like seeing other people's Batmobile designs. I don't like the idea that creators are forced into one style.
Yeah.
Again, that's why we don't have the variety that we had in the 70s. We don't have fully painted books anymore, or very, very rarely.
Yeah.
It's all computer colored instead. And it's too bad because I'm a classically trained artist and I love to work in full color, old school.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that something that you might still do? Are you interested in self-publishing or doing some small books, like when you did Metaphysique? Are you interested in doing something like that again, where you can just put it all out there?
Perhaps. It's hard to say at this point. Right now, for a while now, I've been so busy that all I'm doing is focusing on what I've got to do. I am in a position now where I could probably take, if I want, the time to develop some of my own concepts that I've been wanting to do for a long time. I like to write as well. I've got a novel that's 3/4 finished that I would like to finish.
Oh, nice.
And I'd like to illustrate it as well. Not as a graphic novel, but as a novel with illustrations.
Yeah.
And maybe after that, I've always thought it would make a good comic book too.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, I've just got my hands so full for a long time. All along, my whole career, I've had my hands so full with commercial work that I haven't been able to really focus on my own stuff. Metaphysique was the only real opportunity for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when the market crashed and I couldn't get work at DC, and except for a few things, and then things changed, and a lot of people were cut out of the industry, including myself, for 10 years. I was just barely able to keep my head above water, so I had to take on work.
Yeah.
Instead of creating my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I did start writing though. Then there was some good things that came out of that. That's when I started doing the poetry and short stories. And that's when I started my novel as well. But and largely I did that because I was burnt out on drawing. I couldn't imagine after working for like 10 years or 15 years drawing for a living, and I couldn't see myself drawing on spec. I just didn't have the motivation to do that. But I wanted to be creative. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit on my hands, so I started writing. I always knew that I had a writer bug inside me, so I took advantage of that, and I started to develop that, and it's really come along. So, yeah, my own projects are in the future. I've been saying that for a while, but they are coming closer. I can feel it.
Well, that's good. And one of the things Jerry Ordway mentioned in his Ageism in Comics essay was that people are basically working on the same kind of page rates that have been around since like 1995. The page rates haven't really gone up, and that's something that your average comic reader really doesn't think about. The prices are sure going up. You're paying $4 a book on a lot of stuff. DC's been pretty solid on keeping most of their titles at $3 unless it's oversized. But almost anything else you get, man. I mean, Image has got a few $3 books too, but it's $3.50, $4 is the average. And it's hard to believe that your page rates aren't going up along with that. You know, I mean, I'm sure there's some guys out there that, you know, they're the super hot guys, your Brian Michael Bendises and Jeff Johns as far as writing, and, you know, Jim Lee and guys like that as far as art are definitely commanding a premium. But it's crazy that the page rate has really stayed the same for 20 years, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Well, the minimum wage in general has stayed low. You know, if minimum wage had kept up with inflation, it would be somewhere around $20 today.
Oh, wow.
And yet the people that have basically all the money in the culture are fighting against even a raise of minimum wage to like $9.
Yeah. I mean, that is a hot button issue with me at work, with my coworkers at work. I'm very liberal in a lot of ways. And
now it takes two parents working generally to maintain the kind of lifestyle that one parent working could have done when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Or even more. They can't even maintain it anymore, even with two parents. It depends on their jobs, of course, but I'm talking generally. These kind of economic issues are what came to mind when I read Jerry Ordway's article, his blog. To me, it all smacks of outsourcing, and he even mentioned outsourcing, I think, at one point in his blog. But our whole culture has been experiencing this for a long time. You know, there's a concentration of wealth. That's what capitalism creates, and I'm not against capitalism, but it has to be balanced with socialism, because otherwise it just concentrates wealth in fewer and fewer and fewer hands, and it creates poverty everywhere else. So
that's true.
That's why we have Democrats and Republicans. But for the last 10 years, and even actually for the last 20 or 30 years, there's been increasing wealth concentrated in the top 1% in spite of that supposed balance in our politics. These are the kind of things that I thought of when I heard what Jerry. Of course, I'd already been thinking of him because I went through what Jerry went through, even though I'm like 5 years younger than him. Or maybe only 2 or 3. I went through that 10 years before he did. Of course, I didn't have a wife and children.
Yeah.
I did have a mortgage, though. I had to sell my house. I don't know if he's going to have to do that.
Wow.
He might have to downgrade his life like I did. I radically downsized my life.
Now,
to pay off my debts, it took me 7 years. So I had a lot of debt. That's one of the main reasons I couldn't just start doing my own stuff. I couldn't do things on spec because I would just get even deeper in debt. I was living off credit cards for a while there. Whenever things slowed down, and I was paying the minimum as much as I could on each card. It took me like 7 years to get out of debt.
That's crazy. Now, do you think that you would have had the same problems getting work like with DC or whoever at the time? If the crash hadn't happened, like, you think if there'd still been solid, or do you think it was that they would have continued going with newer and more, I guess, modern?
No, I think it was just par for the course. They always do that.
Yeah.
The comics industry has always been not a big money maker. You know, it's always been like a ghetto of the entertainment industry. That's what I mentioned on Facebook. Still to this day, even though there's a lot more attention, or at least more attention than there has been for a while in comics. I say for a while because Superman when he first came out, he was one of the only superheroes out there, and that title was selling 1 million copies a month or more. So, back in the 40s. Yeah,
I was talking about that recently, how, like, I told somebody, I was like, oh, wow, whatever new book came out sold like 200,000 copies, and that's spectacular for a current book, to sell 200,000 copies a month. And they're like, oh, that's a lot of books. I'm like, no, really, that's not. I mean, the old Captain Marvel stuff and Action and Early Detective was selling like nothing. Every kid had copies. Everybody was buying these books.
Well, it goes back to the economic pressures, and among them are things that we can't really control that are inevitable. The growth of technology has opened up all kinds of other entertainment markets for everybody, and comics are just a small section of that. I think they'll still be around. I don't think comics are dying. People who say that, I just respond, well, they've been dying for 20, 30, 40 years. They were always on the verge of collapse, and the comics industry has always been on the verge of collapse. I think they'll be around, just like people were saying that radio was dying when TV came on the scene, and they also said that they would kill movies, in theaters, because now everybody would watch things at home. And that actually happened again. That kind of talk happened again when we got VCRs and DVDs. But radio's still here. Movies are still here. I think it just spreads the entertainment resources around. But the problem is, nothing's absolutely predictable. Some things do die off. Yeah.
Well, you also have to adapt, too. Industries have to adapt, and I like that. I don't know how you feel about it as a creator, but about digital comics. personally, I'm a book collector, toy collector, comic collector, yo-yo collector. I collect lots of stuff, and I like to have it. I like to hold it. I like to touch it. I like the smell, the feel of books, things like that. But I also have a pretty large...
You don't need to plug in anything. You don't need a power source.
Exactly.
They have their own power source. It's called atoms and electrons and molecules.
But I also have a pretty large digital collection, and I think it's nice to have stuff digitally because it is convenient if I want to go... if I want to take a lot of stuff with me and don't have the room for it, I could throw a lot of stuff on my iPad and hop in the car and on a road trip and enjoy that. But how do you feel about digital comics? How do you feel about that in the industry right now? Do you think it's good, bad, indifferent?
I'm kind of indifferent to it. I mean, I don't have anything against them, except what I was saying, my own personal taste. I prefer having an actual book in front of me.
Yeah.
But I am all for progress. I'm very progressive. I'm very much a futurist in my attitudes towards technology. I think we can only go forward. More than likely, it's going to destroy us. But it'll be destroyed eventually anyway if we don't go forward. An asteroid strike eventually will wipe us out or something. So, we have to use our brains. We have to use our minds. And digital technology, computer technology is increasing its rate of innovation faster than any other technology, and it's affecting every other aspect of life. It's affecting medicine. It's affecting comics. It's affecting anything you can think of. Pretty soon, we're going to have computers in household objects. We'll have computer-controlled cars, and the pace is picking up. This rate of innovation is picking up. If it's graphed, it's getting steeper and steeper. Within our lifetimes, we will probably see artificial minds that are, for all intents and purposes, conscious.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning of where it's going to take us.
Well, what's the theory? Something like every 18 months, technology doubles.
Moore's Law,
yeah. It's a really interesting concept, and you don't think about it. I mean, if you think about it, how far we've come just since, I was a kid, since I was in high school. Just cell phone technology is one tiny little thing. We have those giant brick phones that can make calls and receive calls, and now my little...
And access the whole web of information. Well, that's one of the things that's really cool about the modern world is that I've got this. We've all got this. Most of us have this oracle of knowledge in our domiciles. If I have any question at all, I would have had to go to a library. I would have had to call somebody at the library. I would have taken hours of research. I might not have gotten the right answer or any answer at all. Now I can go online. I can not only get an answer to that, but it raises further questions that I can answer ad infinitum. It's really amazing. It's almost like having an angel sent from God in your room that you can ask questions and they'll answer them for you. It's really phenomenal. When I was a kid, the Jetsons was a cartoon, and the computers, even in the Jetsons, took up a whole wall.
Oh yeah.
And there wasn't even a video screen, as far as I can remember. And didn't have all the websites, didn't have all this net of information, or didn't have all the variety.
There were no touch screens in the Jetsons. It was all like joystick and big red button controlled.
Exactly, dials.
Yeah, I work in the avionics industry, and at my company they brought in one of our new flight simulators to show us so we can mess around with. And I've seen flight simulators before where they're the size of a room. They're huge. You walk in and it's this big chair with all these controls. This one was basically 12 flat panels, and it was completely touchscreen. Everything was touchscreen. Throttle. I mean, your every control panel was above you, in front of you, and to the right and left. And there's called pilot seats, and it was seriously one little thing for the computer, and it was like this crazy supercomputer. But it was the size of the whole box was maybe the size of an end table, and it was 10 times more powerful than anything that you have in your home, and 8 touch panels, and it was amazing. And it's it cost $2.3 million or something to develop, and they're just selling the software rights, for hundreds of thousands of dollars for people just to do flight simulation. And even that's come such a long way. It's stuff we never imagined is coming true. And then, like you said, all this information at the touch of a button reminds me of, I don't know if you're a science fiction reader, but Isaac Asimov's Foundation. We basically have a foundation already. We have all of human knowledge, for the most part, not everything, obviously, but stored at the touch of a couple buttons, man. It's amazing.
In fact, the pace of increase of knowledge of information is so great that you can't even keep up with it. Even if you could spend all day, you could never keep up with how fast it's going.
Yeah.
We have more knowledge now than is humanly possible to follow, which is why we're going to end up having artificial intelligence butlers and, basically they're going to become gods.
Bicentennial Man kind of style robots,
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I just always, when I was a kid, you would see these people on television or read about them that were kind of these savants that were experts in multiple fields, that could speak multiple languages, and they were like Asimov himself, who wrote books on physics and chemistry and just anything you can think of, and he was like an expert in every field you could think of, and now every field is so just vast that I don't think any one person can even really become an expert in one field anymore. It never ends. Like stuff. I mean, maybe, but
depends how you define expert. But yeah, I know what you're saying. I totally agree.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Well, the only way that we might be able to keep up with this consciously, rather than just become an animal attending to its needs, is if we augment our own brains with it. If we basically become one with it. Eventually in time. Maybe within our lifetimes, maybe within your lifetime, maybe within the next generation. If we don't wipe ourselves out, this exponential increase of computer technology, of information capacity is going to revolutionize absolutely everything. I mean, it may even end up providing us with things that we can't even imagine right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read anything about, I forget what they're called. Basically, it's programmable matter.
Oh yeah, where they're storing information in atoms themselves, like that kind of stuff.
Well, yes, that would be the ultimate goal. Well, that's more like the ultimate computer technology.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about actually manipulating matter, like having a clump of matter that is basically microscopic or near microscopic nanobots that can assume any shape. So you can have just a clump of matter in the room, and you could push a few buttons or type in your program and choose what you want the decor in the room to look like, and it would just assume it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is science fiction novel future right there, man.
Even apparent superpowers will be possible because it will be able to conform to our body and enhance our strength, give us flying abilities. I mean, not to mention how we're going to be able to change our own genetics in our own bodies. And we may even transcend our own biology. But this brings up some really deep philosophical questions that have always fascinated me. Like, what is the nature of identity? If you replace one neuron in your brain every second, or actually you'd have to replace probably 10 or 100 of them every second in order to replace your whole brain within your lifetime, because there's like 10 billion neurons in your brain. But if you wouldn't notice the change day to day. Mm-hmm. But eventually, if you could replace the neurons with, something else, like a circuitry that performs the same thing, by digital circuitry, you wouldn't notice the change day by day. But at the end of, 20 years or whatever, you wouldn't be biological anymore.
At what point do you not become you anymore?
Pardon?
At what point do you not become you anymore? Do you become completely...
If you don't feel the change, you still think the same, you still feel the same, you still remember everything, or you think you do.
They actually are touching on that right now in the Justice League comic with Cyborg. They brought up that exact thing. It's in this latest storyline. It's the Throne of Atlantis, and he's not built for underwater anything. He's a cyborg, and he's basically got like his heart, one lung, his brain, and a little bit of flesh left. He's mostly robot, and he wants to be able to go underwater and deal with this stuff. And he's like, can you change it to where I can go underwater? They're like, yeah, but we'll have to remove your lung. It's one of the last parts of you that's human. And he's like, do it. And he does it. And there's no noticeable change. He doesn't feel any different. He's still him, but he's that much less human. And it's like, at what point does he...
It's biological. It depends on how you define human.
Yeah. But it's like, at what point does he become, the brain in the jar kind of thing? Does he become... And at the same time, he's already locked...
Yeah. You can extend that to the brain, like I was saying. If you change your whole brain over, but you remember everything, you don't feel any different. Are you still the same?
And he's linked into computer networks all over the world. So where is that line? Where does his brain end and the computer begin? And
right.
Is he controlling? Is his brain running the computers, or is the computers running his brain? That's the.
But attaining the ultimate intelligence, for ourselves. Attaining immortality, near infinite powers of various kinds, may require our giving up our old traditional ideas of individuality. But it would be a big gain. It would be like a chimp saying, being offered humanity, being offered modern technology, or let's say something, because we're too close to the chimps, it would actually be more like offering an insect humanity. Would it want it? If you could even communicate with it, if we could even conceive of it. But, it wouldn't even understand. It wouldn't even understand what it's passing up if it said no.
Yeah.
But the objective fact would be that it would be passing up a lot more than it ever could be by itself or dream of. So if we decide to remain human, we're going to be passing up what looks like an infinite capacity.
I hope that you're at least touching on some of the stuff in your novel or some of the stuff you're writing, because you seem to have a really good grasp on it, and I'd like to hear more about this. I'd like to read some stuff that you have. Does your novel touch on any stuff like this?
Yeah, science fiction. It's science fantasy mixed with science fiction. It's got nanotechnology. It's got shrunken scientists. It's got aliens from alternative dimensions. It's actually got everything but the kitchen sink. And I hope I'm not putting too much into it, but it's holding together really well so far.
That's awesome. Are you just kind of working on that as you go, or do you have like a goal date set? Or
every now and then when I have some time off from work, I focus on it. But I haven't had the time to focus on it at all for a long time now. But when I do, after a week or two, it's like I'm enjoying that more than I ever enjoyed drawing.
Oh, wow.
It engages the whole mind rather than, well, maybe it's just because I'm drawing for so long.
Yeah.
And I'm used to it. So this is more like drawing used to be when I was trying to learn how to draw. Mm-hmm. It engaged my whole mind. But now that's more of a craft that I've mastered. So when I'm writing, it's something that I haven't mastered, like I've mastered that craft, and it just feels fresher to me. I feel more alive when I'm doing it.
That's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to reading that. Hopefully you will get it done at some point soon, so I could sit down with it, because I'm a sci-fi fantasy guy, so that sounds right up my alley. What else are you working on right now? I know you're doing Batman Beyond. What other stuff are you doing that we can grab and I can get my listeners to?
The other main thing I'm working on right now is a job that I've signed a non-disclosure agreement for, so I can't talk about it.
Is that the one
I will say that's not comics per se. It's through my agent in London called Debut Art. Okay. They're constantly offering me illustration jobs that I'm constantly turning down because I got a monthly title. Yeah. But this one was too good to say no to. Although I'm thinking I should have said no because I don't have the time for it. Basically, today, for the next 3 months, it's just going to be constant work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know you said you really couldn't talk about you said you were doing some DC stuff. You were drawing some of DC characters, and you can't really talk about it. Is there anything you can tell us about that at all?
No.
Oh, that's okay, though. But we can look forward to seeing your touch on some of those characters at some point in some way, shape, or form, then.
That's an excellent way of putting it, yes.
Okay. I'll take that. I will absolutely take that. You were doing Archie for a while, weren't you?
Yeah, about 2 years or so.
Really? How was that? Like, that's got to be a far cry from your Batman and Anarchy and Metaphysique. Like, was it enjoyable? Was it good? Like,
yeah, it actually really was. After I finished working for D. First Salvo, doing the title The Danger's Dozen, they're situated in Bermuda. Mm-hmm. Actually got a free Bermuda trip out of it, too, which was neat, because I'd never been to Bermuda before. Nice. Beautiful little place. A little crowded, but beautiful. After I finished working for them, I had just paid off the debt that I told you took me 7 years to pay off. Yeah. And I didn't really want to start living off my credit cards again. So I was looking for work, and I went to the New York Con, and I walked through Artist Alley, and I saw Joe Staten there. And I'm not sure if I'd met him before that or not. Of course, I knew a lot about Joe. And I introduced myself, and we were talking for a while, and I was looking at his table. This is an Artist Alley. He had a bunch of Archie stuff there, the new look Archie stuff. And I asked him about that. And as I was talking to him, one of the Archie editors came over, Mike Pellerito, and offered me work. And I said, yeah, I could consider that. So when I got home, after a few weeks, I called him, or he called me, I forget which. And I thought I was just going to be drawing in the traditional Archie style. Mm-hmm. And it was going to be 2 separate books, actually. One where he's both alternate realities, one where he's married to Veronica and one where he's married to Betty. Yeah. did try to draw it in the traditional Archie style, but I didn't really. Basically, I kind of took it and ran with it. What I learned while sketching up the characters and working on a few tryout pages first was that if you keep the faces, the formulas for the faces, the same as the traditional Archie cartoon, then all the rest of it can be more or less realistic, and it still looks just like traditional Archie. It just looks like a kind of a more sophisticated, updated version of traditional Archie. Like you put it in more three-quarters views, you put it in deeper perspective, you put in some more shadows and stuff. But I kept the formula for the faces the same and the basic body proportions the same, and it worked fine. And I did that on my own, and they didn't even complain. They hardly even gave me any feedback about that specific change.
Wow.
But what they did do, and I was surprised and delighted by it, was that they combined both of the stories into that one book, Life with Archie, and they printed it on higher quality paper on an oversized book and featured it like a magazine, which was phenomenal. It looked a lot better than I expected it would look.
Wow.
And what I also found is that although I love drawing action scenes, I mean, when I was a kid, drawing my own comics, I always drew. I couldn't wait for the action scenes, you know. I have a Batman story that I drew when I was 15, where basically half the book is Batman fighting like 500 guys single-handedly. and the backgrounds, like the cities and stuff, when you could see the cities, it was obvious that I didn't give a crap about that. They were just boxes. They were just simplistic things. But I was really good at anatomy at an early age because I was so obsessed with learning to draw the human figure in motion. And when I became more professional, I had to learn to get those figures into environments that looked as well developed as the figures. And it took me a while to get to the point where I felt comfortable with that. But by the time I was drawing Archie, of course, I was at that point, and I'd already drawn so many scenes of talking heads in even superhero comics that I knew that the pattern on the page was what really intrigued me. The storytelling was what really intrigued me. And although I missed all the anatomy and the action and the science fiction stuff in Archie, it was still basically the same as drawing comics. Any kind of comics for me, it was still basically the same experience because it was trying to make the images as dynamic as possible, even though they're just talking heads. And I found it a challenge, and I found it very satisfying.
Well, I've noticed a lot of artists, not a lot. A lot I've seen, they're great at drawing action, but when they start drawing something as simple as sitting around a table or standing there talking, their stuff looks very uncomfortable, very forced.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there are some artists that can do that, obviously, and there's some to do it well, but there's some that just, unless somebody's moving or fighting or jumping or flying or whatever, that's an aspect of what I was talking about. That's what I was like when I was a younger artist, too. Yeah. Well, I mean, just looking online at some of your older art, I think it was with the Batman family where you drew the redesign of Robin. Is that one? Like the Robin with I guess he had the little, the mask. He had the mask, like the headscarf thing. Like, yeah, that was cool. He had like little wing kind of things going on. That was pretty neat.
Actually, that was, I sent that to them when they requested in their books for people to send Robin designs, fans to send Robin designs. I sent them an 18 by 24 large drawing and fully colored.
Wow.
I don't have it anymore. I don't know what the heck happened to it. Maybe I lost it in a move. But it's too bad because I'd love to see it again after all these years. But I do remember it. I was 16. It was much better than what I saw in print. When I finally, months later, it's almost a year later, they finally maybe took them that long to get all the entries and then to make decisions of which ones to print. When I finally saw it in print, I was appalled because it was really small and it wasn't my artwork. Somebody had redrawn it for production.
Really?
Which is understandable because I had added color and everything. They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Large half-tone shot of my drawing.
Yeah.
In a newsprint comic book.
Was it close? I mean, was the quality even touching what yours was? I mean, was it?
Well, it was obviously traced from mine.
Oh, okay.
But it wasn't nearly as good.
Wow.
Technically.
And how old were you? You were like, 14 or something then? Like, you were pretty young, weren't you?
I was 15.
Wow.
15 or 16, close to 16.
That's fantastic for being 15. I mean,
I was obsessed. I was obsessed at a young age.
Well, there's a little segue we can get into because we're hitting about an hour now, and I don't want to keep you a whole lot longer, even though this has been an awesome conversation. I'm having a blast.
Just starting.
I know. Let's talk about Robin a little bit. You kind of helped define the Tim Drake character. You came on Batman not long after the death of Jason Todd, right? It was
not that long, yeah.
A year or two.
It's a year or two, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably 2.
So you had a lot of work with Tim Drake, and the current New 52, they actually retconned their own New 52, because in the first issue of Teen Titans and early issues of all the early issues of New 52, there were mentions of Tim Drake as Robin, even though he's Red Robin in the current universe. Well, Scott Lobdell retconned all of those stories from earlier that year, saying that Tim Drake was never actually Robin, that he was actually just a Red Robin. He was still Batman's sidekick. He was, I think there's some kind of craziness about how he was, Tim Drake's not even his name. It's he was in Witness Protection, and that's the name he took in Witness Protection, and like his teammates in Teen Titans don't even know his real name because of his association with Batman, because it's secrets he can't tell, that aren't his to tell. And they kind of retconned it out to say that he was still a sidekick, but he never took the Robin mantle. He was only the Red Robin.
Interesting.
And
I know that Batman's son is not one of the Robins.
Yeah, well, he was. He died.
He died, huh?
Yes, he died. He died last week. That's the other Robin thing I wanted to talk about.
He was a brat. I don't mind him going.
Yeah, and I felt the same way. They actually, a couple of Peter Tomasi, the guy that writes the Batman and Robin book right now, has done a really good job of taking him from a kind of a little asshole to like a somewhat less asshole-ish character. You don't hate him as much. You give him a little personality. I still never really liked him. He was one of my least favorite Robins of all time, but he was tolerable, and he had some interesting stories. Well, Grant Morrison has had his epic Batman run here for 6 or 7 years. He's been doing the Batman RIP and all that stuff, and he kept his Batman Inc. book in, it continued into the New 52, but it was considered non-canon. It was its own little standalone thing. Well, suddenly with issue 8 that came out last week, it is now canon, and Damian Wayne is killed. And they said, they're proving it's canon now by it's actually going through all the Bat books like a Requiem. So it's going to reflect, and the Batman and Robin title is actually going to change names for the next 6 months. It's going to be Batman and Nightwing, Batman and Red Robin.
That first part, Batman and what?
Batman and Robin is the original title. The first one is going to, and then for the next 6 months, the title is going to change every month. One's going to be Batman and Nightwing.
Batman what?
Batman and Nightwing.
Nightwing. Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Batman and Red Robin. Batman and Catwoman. Batman and the Red Hood. I don't remember the other one. I don't know if they're going to actually do Batwoman or not. But so the next few months are going to be the fallout of this, what was going to be a non-canon story that suddenly became canon, where Damian Wayne dies. And he's actually killed by a hyper-aged clone of himself, which is kind of weird. Yeah.
Back to Hush.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Talia actually had cloned Damian, and there was one that was hyper-aged and was an assassin, and he runs him through with a sword and kills him. And that's a big thing right now. People are there's a lot of, death in comics has always been a weird thing, that, the only people that really stay dead are the Waynes, Uncle Ben, and up until a few years ago, Bucky. But that's definitely changed over the years. Pretty much everybody's been back at some point, even at least as a ghost or something.
I wouldn't be surprised if someday in the future, even some of those foundational deaths will be changed just for the sake of change, because these are old characters with long histories. You have to revamp them every now and then just to keep them alive. I wouldn't be surprised if someday we'll have a Batman whose parents didn't die.
Yeah. Well, they touched on that.
I wouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't say I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I could see it actually occurring someday.
Yeah. Well, the kickoff to the New 52 was, at least the name you should be familiar with, since you wrote a book called that, was Flashpoint. They had the Flashpoint miniseries, and the Batman Night of Vengeance Flashpoint miniseries. I don't know did you read that? Did you know anything about that? No.
Well, I only heard about it.
Yeah, it's alternate versions, obviously, and kind of an Elseworlds thing, which you're also familiar with since you kind of started the Elseworlds. It was the mugging happened, and it's Thomas and Martha Wayne and Bruce, but instead of Thomas and Martha getting killed, Bruce is killed by the mugger, by Joe Chill.
Oh, cool.
And so Thomas and Martha kind of go crazy. Thomas Wayne becomes the Batman. Martha Wayne becomes the Joker.
The Joker?
Yeah, she is I kind of spoiled it for you, but, sorry.
I won't be reading it.
Yeah, I didn't think so. But it's actually not bad. It's like a 3-issue thing. I'm trying to think who.
I'm not saying I won't be reading it because I think it's bad. I just thought I don't read comics.
Yeah.
Basically.
So it was an interesting little take. So, and there are Elseworlds-ish type stories out there where they didn't die, and I've seen other ones where they didn't die. And
right. Well, I really loved the Elseworlds because it achieved that. It brought in fresh perspective on these characters.
Yeah.
And it's funny that now we've got all these radical new changes going on that could very well have been Elseworlds tales back when.
Oh, yeah.
Elseworlds back. I mean...
I wish they would. Well, they've got one thing going on now that's kind of Elseworlds. It's the JSA Whistling Skull miniseries. I think it was based off of a JLA or a JSA Elseworlds kind of tale, and this is like a little mini continuing it on. It's not getting a whole lot of good response right now. I read it. I don't think it's bad, but I love that alternate take. Elseworlds, weird takeoff stuff.
There were a few ideas that I had pitched along with Alan Grant for alternate Batman titles that didn't make it, and other titles. One of them was, this was not with Alan Grant, this was just my own idea, combining the Atom and the Flash as one character. And so he was basically a shrunken super speedster.
I saw some. I think I saw some sketches about that you put out. A couple of them.
It's in my color sketchbook.
Yeah.
Sketches, yeah. That's actually was used as kind of a springboard inspiration for the novel that I started writing way back then.
Oh, really?
That I mentioned to you that I'm about 3/4 done with.
Well, you did say you have shrunken scientists, so
Yeah.
There you go.
I've always been fascinated by that ever since I was a kid. I remember The Incredible Shrinking Man.
Yeah.
When I was 9 years old, I think I first saw that movie, and whenever it came out TV, maybe once or twice a year, because we didn't have videos and stuff, I had to wait for it.
Mm-hmm.
It usually came out early in the morning, and I would have to ask my mom. I'd have to get my mom's permission to get up, because tomorrow was a school day, to get up and watch The Incredible Shrinking Man. I was so obsessed with it. And when I came across the novel, I found it abandoned in a house, in a decrepit house next door that was about to be renovated. The people had moved out, and they'd left a few pieces of junk around, and that's where I found the novel, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and I read it. So I've always been fascinated with that concept, and it plays a large part in the novel that I'm writing.
Yeah. Well, they actually just brought the Atom back finally in the New 52. Well, they had Ray Palmer already. He was like a scientist character in the Frankenstein Agent of Shade book. I kind of liked him because it was they basically had the entire complex of scientists shrunken down to into a whole city or a complex kind of thing, and inside something the size of a tennis ball that floated around with a little force field around it.
Very cool.
And but now in the new JLA book, or new Justice League book, they've got an Atom character. They haven't introduced her yet. It's a female. They haven't introduced her, but it just shows this little miniature character with very small word bubbles in shadow, and you don't really even know what it is. You just see tiny word bubbles with smaller print. They never say Atom or whatever. She's just kind of hanging out. And they had her in a teaser, the Trinity War teaser last Free Comic Book Day last year. They showed a little miniature Atom. But so the Atom is coming back. So maybe that'll get you reading a little bit again if you've got a character that a concept you like. I don't know, but.
Well, like I said, when I go to comic books conventions, which is fairly rare, but I went to seven of them this year.
Oh, wow.
Some years I go to a lot more of them than others. I do take a walk around and I pick up some books. Mm-hmm. But there's so much out there that unless you're really in touch with it on a day-to-day basis, you don't really know what you're missing. You don't really know what to look for either. That's why I picked up the hardbound version of the New 52s, because I figured I'd just read them all. And when I finished the stories, each story, I wanted to read another one. It's true.
Yeah. There was some good stuff out there. There was some that I didn't care for, but there are a couple books out there, man. Every week when they come out, it's a must read for me. I'm a big Jonah Hex fan, and I've always wanted to see your take on Jonah Hex. I don't know if you ever got to draw Jonah Hex or not, but I think
I drew him once at a convention sketch. Yeah.
Oh, really? Man, I would like to see that. But the All-Star Western book is good. There's some books out there that kind of appeal to the older school fan. Jonah Hex has been around for a long time, and Gray and Palmiotti are great guys doing a great book. But it's kind of overwhelming almost. If you've been out of the scene for a while and you don't know where to start, it's kind of hard to find where to start. It's really overwhelming for new readers.
That impinges on an aspect of the economics that we were talking about earlier too, as a side issue to Jerry Ordway's blog, and that is that getting new readers in. If I didn't know anything about comics, I would be overwhelmed going to a comic store, and these stories just continue on and on and on. If you haven't read everything before, when I was a kid, you kind of knew what you were buying, and you knew you'd have more or less a beginning and an end, a beginning, a middle, and an end to a story in one issue, and that welcomed new readers. Today, even as a comics fan, I'm overwhelmed. If I go into a store or a convention, I don't know what to buy. I don't know if I pick up something, I'll be in the middle of things. I won't even know what's going on, really.
Yeah. You're right, because when I was a kid, I would pick up books. I didn't have to go to a comic store, the few there were around me when I was a kid, or I can go into a grocery or find somewhere that had comics on a spinner rack and grab one. Or I picked up a lot of comics at yard sales and auctions and stuff as a kid, for $1 here or there, get a stack of them, and you could just grab a random book. I've read so many old Justice League of America and JSA books back in the day that I would just buy a random book. I had no idea what it was and get a full story out of it. And now every story that goes on goes over 3 titles and 6 issues per title, and you've got to, when you're talking $3 to $4 a pop, you're looking at $60, $70 to get a story. And at $4 a pop, and you've got a 21, 22 pages max of story.
How much did comics cost in general, one issue, when you were a young fan?
I think they were...
When? 77?
I was 77, so I started buying...
77, I was already 17. I was already thinking about college.
I was... I'm trying to think. I remember one of the first books I bought off the shelf individually was the Justice League number 5, where Batman punches Guy Gardner.
Right.
The old One Punch book. And it was Kevin McGuire.
I can remember details from stories way back then.
And I can too. I remember a ton of stuff from back then. And some of the books now, like I'll get a book and I'm like, I missed last month's issue. I got to go back and read the last 4 just to remember what the hell happened, Exactly. But I think they were around 75 cents, maybe.
That's what I was thinking.
For just a regular
10 cents.
That's crazy.
I remember coming across a cache of books in a garbage can on my walk home from school when I was in 4th grade that were in good condition. And I just, since they were in the trash can, somebody was throwing them out, I just grabbed them all, brought them home. And they were only from a few years earlier, early 60s, and they were like 5-10 cents.
Wow.
Per issue. And it's just amazing. I remember when dollar comics first came out. That was in the 70s. And it wasn't all comics were dollar comics, but a dollar comic was an oversized issue.
Well, they're like the 100-page giants, right? Like the 100-page giants and the annuals and stuff were like $1, and you got a ton of stuff for $1.
That's true. It's amazing.
Well, I don't know if you saw it. I mean, you might even have some work in it. The new Archie, instead of a 100-page digest, Archie's putting out a 1,000-page digest.
Oh, man.
And it's $15 for 1,000 pages.
Wow. Well, they probably will feature something in there.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of and actually you can order it on Amazon for like $8 for 1,000-page. And it's like, I guess it's a black and white reprint of just Archie through the years. And it looks like a fantastic book. I'm going to pick it up. What the hell, that's a lot of good book for,
Archie's been around. They've been around almost as long as Batman and Superman, constantly, never stopping publishing that I can recall that I know of. I think they've been publishing constantly all that time, and it makes you wonder, how do they do it?
And they still sell a lot. Your average comic fan doesn't think about Archie as a comic book. They think it, but they're on. If you go check out at almost any grocery, there's an Archie digest sitting there next to like your soap opera magazine and everything else. And
well, if you Google their address and you go down to street level and you look at the building, it's so nondescript.
Really?
And if you worked with Archie, as I have, it's a very small operation. They only have like 2 or 3 editors.
Wow.
I mean, it's very small. But somehow they're able to compete. And I think the main reasons are things that creators don't like. They don't offer any royalties. They offer half the page rate of like DC and Marvel comics. Mm. There's no reprint fees that are paid.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Because they're going to be making a lot of money, some money off my stuff for a while now. I won't be seeing any more. It was just a page rate. But I needed the work at the time. I thought of something else that I was going to mention earlier about Elseworlds. Mm-hmm. Some of the concepts that I didn't mention. Yeah. One of them that was turned down that I thought would have been really fun. I had titled Batman of the Apes. Tells the whole story right there, right?
Yeah, there you go.
It would be Wayne and his wife, the Waynes, that crashed in a plane, probably, rather than on a ship in the darkest jungles of either Africa or South America. And Batman would be raised by apes.
So instead of Lord Greystoke, you'd have Lord Wayne.
Yeah. I hadn't actually worked out exactly why he becomes Batman. There are bats in the jungle, so it's not inconceivable. But I love the idea of combining two of my favorite childhood heroes, Batman and Tarzan, because they're both human level beings. Yeah. Even when before I was getting published, I wrote some short. Well, basically, they amounted to just fight scenes between Batman and Tarzan. So I saw them as kind of similar. They were both very athletic, There were even some scenes in drawn by Breyfogle and Giordano in Detective Comics where Batman was swinging through a jungle in a storyline involving the Ten-Eyed Man.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, God, that's like Tarzan. I would love to see him meet Tarzan.
That's awesome. Now, did you read all the Burroughs stuff as a kid? Did you read all the books, or were you watching the movies, or what?
The what stuff?
Did you read all the actual, it was Edgar Rice Burroughs, right?
Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Did you read all the pulp novel stuff, or did you just watch the movie?
I read the first, I think, 3 Tarzan novels.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and look at the titles and read the plots to make sure. I might have read more than that, but yeah, I read those and I watched the movies. I did see a lot of the earlier movies. I was always wanting to see more Tarzan movies.
Mm-hmm. They did a lot. They did several over the years, and they did
enough for me.
Well, I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and at the University of Louisville Library is the Edgar Rice Burroughs collection. And it's open with appointment. You can actually go in and see all the original manuscripts and all of the correspondence he wrote. And the curator of it is as protective of it as you would think. So you have to go in with gloves, and he's very particular and all that. But you can make appointments and go in there and check out some of the original stuff he wrote, which is always kind of cool. I always thought that was pretty neat that the library had like a collection dedicated to him. That's pretty awesome.
Speaking of Tarzan, when I was 13. I saw an advertisement in American Artist magazine for Bern Hogarth's graphic novel of Tarzan. It was called, actually, I've got it right here. Here it is. You may recognize it, Tarzan of the Apes.
Oh, that's awesome. That's amazing.
Did you ever see it before?
I have not. That's really cool.
Bern Hogarth was really associated with Tarzan for a while. He did the newspaper strip for a long time, and then he came out with this. And I remember seeing in the advertisement in American Artist magazine, it had one shot of one of the panels inside, and I had already had purchased or gotten as a gift Bern Hogarth's Dynamic Anatomy, which really helped me in learning about anatomy because it crystallized and simplified the anatomy in a way that I could retain it. In fact, the Batman stuff that I was drawing as a fan back then looks highly influenced by Bern Hogarth's anatomy. But I really wanted that back then, but I couldn't afford it. So I only picked it up recently. And I wish I bought it back then, because now looking at it, it's dated. His posing his anatomical understanding is excellent, but it's kind of stiff.
Yeah.
And it looks academic, and he was a very academic guy.
So more of a textbook kind of anatomy and less fluid anatomy?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. It's as though you're looking at one of his books like Dynamic Anatomy.
Yeah.
Except that it's wearing a loincloth and it's swinging through trees.
Oh, well, that's really interesting. How much did that cost? What was the price on that?
I don't know. I got this online. Originally, I don't know what it was priced at either. I didn't retain my memory of what I bought it for. It was originally priced way back in 1973 at $9.95. But
so that's probably a $40 or $50 book minimum if it were to come out now. And then if it's
I don't really remember what I paid for it. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was just wondering. I didn't know if they'd ever reprinted it or if it's something you can currently get or not. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was a big Tarzan fan. Tarzan's difficult to pull off in the movies too because he's kind of like Batman. For the same reason it's kind of difficult to pull off because he's human level and he's supposed to be able to do these phenomenal things. Yeah. To be able to swing through the trees for miles on end, in other words, brachiate like an ape, that's physically impossible for human beings. Yeah. No matter, even if they were raised by apes, they couldn't do it. Yeah. They might be able to do it a little bit, but not like Tarzan does for miles and miles. In the 70s, when I was a big fan of Batman, Neil Adams, Breyfogle and Giordano and such, Jim Carrey were drawing him, it was often depicted in the artwork as though Batman hardly used his Batmobile. It seemed like he was getting from place to place on a rope like Spider-Man. Yeah. And I guess I just accepted it because it looked cool. But looking back on it now, it's so obviously absurd. And I understand why the Batmobile is important, but even the Batmobile, if you look at it logically, is absurd. The whole thing is absurd. Look at it. He's in a city. How does he get around? For some reason in the Batman movies, starting with 1989, whenever Batman's driving through the city at night, there's hardly any other traffic. Yeah. But I've been to New York City. There are some places at night that you could drive like that. Yeah, that's true. But you'd be pretty dependent on traffic jams.
Yeah, and then with satellite imagery and everything else nowadays, and traffic planes that there's no way.
With voice recognition technology, I mean, you can't really hide your voice.
No.
You can disguise it to the human ear, but not to the technology.
Yeah. So what did you think of the Nolan Batman movies? Did you see them all?
Yeah. Well, they're the best Batman movies yet, unless you're going to include like fan shorts.
Yeah.
My favorite Batman that I've seen yet on film is Batman Dead End, where Batman meets the Predators.
Oh, okay.
It's like a 15, 20-minute film.
Yeah.
And they use tights instead of armor, and it works.
Really? I'll have to check that out. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. I'll have to check it out.
This guy's got a really nice build. I mean, he looks like Batman's build.
Yeah.
And the mask is excellent because there's actually, in the special features on the DVD, they show how they did the mask, and it adheres. It's really thin in the face area, and it adheres to the muscles, so that he can go like this, and you can see his expressions through the mask.
Yeah.
And he also wears white-out contacts, so it looks like he's got white eyes practically.
See, I've always liked that like on that cover I told you about that I really enjoyed, where Batman's hanging upside down with the spiders and the Scarecrow's got him, and you can see that he's got the white eyes and he's got this expression of like sheer terror on his face. Batman, technically you really shouldn't be able to tell that with his mask, but the fact that it follows his facial contours, you can see that shock, fear.
Right. Batman Dead End shows that it can be done. It can actually be done. And it looks so much better and so much more like Batman. And not just with the eyes, but also the tights. He can move with the tights. The thing that always bothered me about all the modern Batman films is the armor. And now it's become canon in the comic books, too. To me, well, I'm kind of coming around to it, but
I don't like the armor mask.
There's too much armor. It interferes with his movement.
The armor cowl has always bothered me.
Pardon me?
The armored cowl has always bothered me.
Especially the neck, because for 20 years he couldn't even move his head from side to side. And when the latest Batman film, or the second to the latest, Lucius Fox says, "I see. You want to be able to move your head." And I'm sitting there in the theater going, "Well, boys, take me off."
Oh, man. I haven't seen this yet either. I just heard about it a couple days ago. Supposedly there's a new Wonder Woman fan film that's out there. That's a 20 or I guess a 20, 25 minute short, and it's supposedly kind of true to old school Wonder Woman. It looks amazing. There's a scene, I guess it's, I think somebody said it might have been set in like a World War II kind of Wonder Woman. I'm not positive. But she like picks up a 30mm machine gun and starts shooting planes out of the sky with it, and like it's just. I'm gonna have to look it up later. I keep meaning to, and I've had such a busy week, I keep forgetting. But it's.
They're made by fans, so the fans really know the characters better than I think some of these big studios do. Like for instance, the last Superman movie. They tried to go with the Chris Reeve look, and they tried to recreate that, and that's doomed to failure from the beginning. I could have told them that. It's like trying to recreate magic. You can't recreate the exact same magic. They should have gone with something entirely different. I like the special effects. It was great for the first time to be able to see Superman without wires or anything, flying around and catching jets and bullets bouncing off his cornea. That was great.
Yeah,
that's what I always wanted to see. But Superman himself in the costume, it's just like they didn't quite catch the essence of the guy. Some of the fan films, they'll do a lot better job. Like I don't know what they're titled, but you may have seen them. They've got fan films where basically they're trailers for movies that haven't been made yet, fan trailers.
Yeah.
For Batman meeting Superman.
I saw that one.
The guy they've got playing Superman, actually there's a couple of different guys. They're much bulkier, they're more muscular. And I know that it would be difficult to pull off Clark Kent.
Yeah.
I guess there could be a line that said, I played football in college. They could kind of get away with that. Yeah. I mean, after all, they can get away with just the glasses. Yeah. Certainly they can get away with the bill.
There's definitely a suspension of disbelief, when it comes to a character like Superman. There's always been that.
These superheroes work better when they're really buff, and Hollywood hasn't seemed to be able to really glom onto that yet. I mean, you get guys that are in shape, maybe, but they're superheroes. They got to be really extraordinary physically.
Yeah,
and it's difficult to get a guy that is both a great actor and is that kind of a physique. Has that kind of physique.
I think that's their toughest part, is finding somebody that is going to fit the role as Clark Kent and an actor that's good enough to pull it off. And that's going to be at that bill. But then I don't know. You see guys like Edward Norton, man. You see him go from, you see him go into American History X, and that guy looks crazy buff in that movie. And he's not a big dude, but he looks crazy cut. He looks like he's been lifting in prison for years, kind of like his character. And then he goes to his next movie, like, you watch him from that to Death to Smoochie, and you're like, this isn't the same guy, man. What the hell's going on here? But I guess it can be done with enough dedication. Or you get like a...
Christian Bale.
Yeah, Christian Bale when, in The Machinist. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, man. He goes down to about...
It's like, I don't know, 50 pounds or something for that role.
Yeah, it's unreal.
He really suffered physically for it, too. I remember reading about that.
Yeah, I don't see how he could have even recovered health-wise, but it was unreal the size difference he was between The Machinist and anything else he's ever done. So I guess it can be done. And then the guy that in 300, I can't think of his name off the top of my head right now.
Guy that played the King?
Yeah. He got huge and cut, and he doesn't look quite so big in some other movies. So I guess it can be done, but at the same time, until recently when these superhero movies have gotten so big and the budgets have gotten out of this world, to find an actor that's at that level and willing to do that kind of stuff has probably been tough,
Yeah, I think so, too. That brings up another interesting segue into maybe computer games. I don't play computer games, but I watch some of them online. It's amazing, the animation that they're doing now. It's better than the movies, if you ask me. I want to see an entire Batman movie made with computer animation. That's what I want to see. Because then you can get away with having the cape blow it just the way you want it to for maximum dramatic effect.
Yeah.
You can be as buff as you want and more athletic than any human being could actually pull off.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm just saying this off the cuff. I shouldn't say I think this, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's what the future of superhero movies is going to be. It's going to be computer animated.
I can see that. Did you see the Arkham Asylum game?
Yes.
That was fantastic. Like, I mean, it's amazing. I've heard discussion of this, and I agree with it. There seems to be a weird disconnect between video games and comic books when you would think they would naturally go hand in hand. It is rare, few and far between, to find a comic that translates to a video game well, and vice versa. You get a great comic, and they make a video game of it. I don't know. I think it's.
I would assume I don't play computer video games, but I would assume that it's because the video games are all concentrated on the action.
I think so.
There's a story there, but it's not as complex as it is in comics, is it?
Some. Now, the Arkham Asylum game was very, very good and had a lot of storyline. There was also a lot of side quests, side story going on where, you could go. There were the crazies escaping Arkham, while he was in there and he had to fight them, but there were also some still in their cells. Like you can go visit Mr. Zsasz, and you have to fight him early, but you can go visit Calendar Man in his cell, and if you visit him on certain dates, you get different, like on holidays, you get different content from him. And
I find it amusing that you brought up the issue of continuity between video games and comics. I mean, talk about the continuity bug. Man, I never even considered that.
Yeah.
That's because I don't play computer games, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's
computer games. Last time I played video games was back when, I don't know, what were they called? Battlezone.
Well, I think also it's
this new stuff with actual human figures looking realistic. I haven't played any of those yet.
I tell you, man, if you ever get a chance, just sit down and watch the cutscenes from Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. It'll blow you away.
I have seen those.
All right. And it's fun. I have video games. I play them occasionally. I just don't have a lot of time to do it, so I go through my phases where I'll sit down and play for a couple hours one day and then not touch it again for a month. But Arkham Asylum is one of those ones I just burned through because it was everything I wanted in a video game, because I'm such a huge comic fan. It was everything I wanted. And but I don't know what the disconnect is. I don't know if it's one of those where they, the comic company sells, licenses out the rights to the company and just says, like, don't do this with it, but do whatever else you want. And so they just, there are a few games out there, the Arkham games or the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games are good. There's the DC Universe Online, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, kind of like the World of Warcraft, but with DC heroes. Like, that's pretty cool. I don't know what the disconnect is. I think it's a question that people have been asking for a long time on both sides of the coin, video game people and comic people. It's like, why in the hell can't we meet in the middle and put out more than one good game every month of Sundays that's worth doing, or a good video game comic book that, like, there are some games out there, video games out there that are just independent of comics that are fantastic, and you want to read a comic from them, and the couple that have been out there, you're just like, I don't know. I don't know what the disconnect is.
There were comics that were translated from the video game, and the comics didn't hold up as well?
Yeah, there was a couple. I think there might have been an Assassin's Creed one. There have been a few over the years. What's that?
On the other way, a comic story is actually Has it ever been translated directly into a video game?
I don't know per se. Now, there was the sequel to Arkham Asylum was called Arkham City, and DC, this came out about the time, I believe, right before or right after New 52 launched, and they actually put out DC put out an Arkham City comic that was supposed to be a direct link between Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. It was supposed to be the go-between, the bridge. So you're supposed to play through Arkham City or Arkham Asylum, read this miniseries, and then go into the new game. And it was good. Like it was pretty good. It could have been better. The art was nice. It was also kind of a more old school take on Batman. It wasn't the newer style. It was more of a 70s, 80s kind of style, I guess. It was, I don't know, and it wasn't well received. I thought it was okay. I thought it was a nice bridge, but I think when you've got opportunities like that, you should take them and just put your best guys on it and really do something, man. You've got a chance to.
Yeah.
Because you got video game people that would pick that up that they wouldn't normally. You know, they're like, oh, I love the game, but I'm not a comic guy. But hey, there's a bridge between these two games, and I can find out what's going on. It's 6 issues. It's not a lot of money investment. Why not really go for it and put your big guys. Put Scott Snyder writing it, and put a Jim Lee drawing it, which is going to be the new Superman book, which is a fantastic idea. Put that out there and appeal to both audiences. You've got your big names that the comic guys are going to jump on, and you've got your story that a video game guy's going to get. I don't know. I don't understand the disconnect.
I don't understand a lot of decisions that are made by the people that make these decisions. To get back to the question that you asked about the Nolan Batman films, we kind of got off of that right away. My main problem with those films, I liked them. They were great. And the last one actually made me cry at the ending. It transcended the genre of superheroes. Mm-hmm. It looked like something out of some classic film from the 50s or the 60s when Alfred was in that cafe and he was missing Bruce. And then was it just his imagination or was he really sitting over there? It just really made me tear up. I was amazed that I could tear up over a superhero film. But my main problem with Nolan's vision was that Batman wasn't a self-made man. Not only did he inherit everything, which is fine, I mean, he inherits a fortune, but he gets all of his technology from Lucius Fox and from Wayne Enterprises. Yeah. He didn't even become Batman until Ra's al Ghul basically trained him. He didn't train himself. That's the main problem I had with it. The Batman that I know is the reason he's so preternaturally superior to everybody else around him is that he's been relentlessly training himself from when he was about 8 or 9 years old until he's an adult, and so that gives you some kind of a logical reason to believe that he would be practically almost superhuman. Yeah. But in the Nolan films, he's just this angry guy with a gun and wandering around the world and getting in fights. Yeah. Until Ra's al Ghul trains him, and if you ask me, that would just make him equal to any of these other guys that are equally trained. Batman's got to be extremely unique, and he's got to be much more self-made. That was my problem. I guess he was trying to make it as realistic as possible, but that's the problem with Batman. You're always walking that tightrope between fantasy and realism.
One of the things I always liked about
more into fantasy.
Yeah, one of the things I liked about the comic Batman versus the Nolan Batman is, he. In the movie, he, like you said, he pretty much trained with Ra's al Ghul. But in the comics, and I don't remember where this originally started, if it was even one of the original origins of him, I'm not sure. But he did go train with other people, but he trained with lots of other people. Right. He learned like every form of combat you can think of, everything.
I think that subject was first broached by Denny O'Neil in The Untold Legend of the Batman in 1977 or so. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was a good year.
Also, he trained himself to... Pardon me?
That was a good year. I like that year.
Also, Bruce Wayne trained himself to be an expert scientist, and he is a genius scientist. And in the movies, whenever something comes up, he doesn't seem to know any more than one of the people in the audience. He has to ask Lucius Fox about it. Yeah. It's not Batman to me. It's like a guy playing Batman.
My other main problem was, in the last movie, he pretty much just gives up and lets the company go to pot, and he just doesn't, he's not making any decisions. That's not something Bruce Wayne would do to me. Like I know there's the whole debate of who is the real, is it Batman and the mask is Bruce Wayne, or is it Bruce Wayne and the mask is Batman? I know that's a big debate for the years, for the ages, but at the same time,
it's a big issue.
Yeah, it's at the same time, it's very much Bruce Wayne is a very much part of him, whether it's the real him or the fake him. And he's not going to lock it just because he got hurt and he thought he accomplish what he needed to accomplish, he's not going to just let his company go to nothing. He's not going to let it, he does very important stuff. He has charities,
Well, it doesn't really matter if you call it Bruce Wayne or Batman. Even if he's Batman, even when he's Bruce Wayne, if he's Batman in disguise, if Bruce Wayne is nothing but Batman in disguise, Batman wouldn't let Bruce Wayne do a bad job. Batman wouldn't let his company, go to pot.
Exactly. I just that part bugged me, and then that's why when I didn't watch Dark Knight Rises until well after it was out of the theaters. It came out on DVD, and I went and rented a copy of the Redbox and watched it. And the first half of the movie, I was mad. I was like, no, and as the movie progressed, I was getting it was getting me, and I liked it, and I like how it ended. I liked the Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, him giving him the Batcave, basically. Even though there's a lot of questions there. The Wayne Manor goes to charity. Basically, it's going to become a state-run building, but you got the whole Batcave underneath it. He's supposed to work out of that or whatever. And then, like you said, the cafe scene when they're in Paris or whatever. And I like that. And I like how everything was resolved, but just the first half of the movie made me mad because I wanted to really love it. And I still like the movie, don't get me wrong, but I would have loved the movie if they'd have handled that better.
It's funny how I mentioned how I thought there wasn't enough fantasy in it, and that Batman should be more of a self-made man, almost preternaturally capable guy. And yet, one of the parts of the movie that bothered me is how quickly he recovered from that back injury.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that bothered me, even though it goes right in line with what I'm saying. But it doesn't go in line with the movie, because the movie is more realistic all the way through. And suddenly, he's able to do that. I love the part where he climbs out.
That's great.
There might be some logical problems with there being a hole there, and they're being given the chance to climb out at all. But I like that scene.
My problem was more after he climbed out, how he got back into Gotham City. How he got wherever the hole was. I don't remember where they said it was, or even if they even did say where it was.
I don't recall.
But how he got from there back to Gotham City and then into Gotham City that was on military lockdown. It was basically like their version of No Man's Land. And I had that problem. I think that should have been a little bit more explained because he had no money, he had no resources. He just basically recovered in in a matter of, I guess, just weeks, a couple months. He recovers from this debilitating back injury and knee problem. And
I think that recovering from the back injury is more difficult than getting from one place to another.
Yeah, exactly. But they kind of just...
I don't know how long it was, but it was only a matter of months, and I don't think it's possible.
I wouldn't think so either. I mean, I don't know if you're a sports fan at all, but they just... the Minnesota Vikings, Adrian Peterson, had an ACL tear a year ago, at the end of the season in the 2011-2012 season. And he returned by the beginning of the 2012-2013 season and ran for almost broke the record for number of yards and just had a phenomenal... He was the MVP of the league. And all that's been talked about is how it's virtually impossible to recover from an ACL tear, which is a terrible thing to have. I have an ACL tear, and it sucks, let me tell you. But
what does ACL stand for?
What's that?
What does ACL stand for?
The anterior cruciate ligament. It's one of your knee ligaments, I believe, the outside knee ligament. So it really... What's that?
I had some similar injury, except in my shoulder. I had a ligament tear, and it took a heck of a long time to heal. Before we could really start working with it. And it's still never going to be exactly the same.
Exactly.
You can't imagine that something as massive as a broken back could be recovered from and have you back in fighting trim to fight Bane within a few months or even less than a year. I would think it would take a long time. Yeah,
I mean, medical science definitely had, like we talked about the science progression earlier.
If he had nanotechnology or something, he might have been able to affect some kind of repair, but he was in a prison.
Yeah.
They just hung him from a rope, and that supposedly cures him.
He was in a third world prison. It's not like he was even in a prison that had a rehab program. This is a guy with a bunch of people that don't like him, and he's being held there, and he's watching a shitty TV to find out what's going on. And like I said, the dude's strapped him to a rope and jerks him up and down a few times. I don't know.
Ultimately, though, my main problem with it all was just that they scuttled the whole origin of Batman, except for the death of his parents. The real origin of Batman is all those years of training.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be Batman if you don't have all those years of training.
And not just physically.
Some guy in a bad suit.
Not just physically. He studied all over the world. He took all the martial arts, the boxing, anything you can think of, the gymnastics. Because like you said, if he's gonna brachiate all over town all the time, that's a heavy amount of gymnastics training just to do it from one building to the other. Let alone,
Well, I hate to see it go, but I think they have to let go of the brachiating.
Yeah.
It's just not possible.
One thing I've noticed in comics recently is when you've got characters like that, they just kind of just brush off the travel aspect, the getting around town aspect. Yeah. They don't.
Spain has Batcaves all over the world. Who knows? But they should have explained it. You're right.
Yeah.
Might have I mean, I wouldn't put it beyond the Batman that I know. The Batman that I idealize, or to have caches of equipment all over the world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've got in the Punisher mythos, and then actually in the current Green Arrow mythos, they both have little stockades of stuff all over town, little safe houses that absolutely no one knows about, and they have to fall back on it. Like there's a Punisher storyline where he goes to his safe houses and finds out that somebody's infiltrated them all. He doesn't really have any safe houses left. And it crippled him because, he's always ready for his main stock to get, or his main hideout or whatever to get hit. That can happen. But, he's always got a backup. And when all his backups are taken out, what do you do? And with Batman, he's always got a plan. I mean, Batman's always got a plan. I love that about Batman, but they don't really go into that aspect of Batman in the movies. He's got a plan to take out all the Justice League, but...
Well, my basic summing up of my answer to your question about how I felt about the Nolan films, and Batman films in general, is that the ideal Batman film still hasn't yet been made.
Yeah.
But I do think it's coming. But we're getting closer all the time.
That's true.
He can move his head now. That's a good step.
That is true.
I like him flying. No. It's ridiculous that his cape... I mean, the technology of his cape being able to go stiff, that's actually feasible. That's theoretically possible. Mm-hmm. We might even have that now. Yeah. But his arms would not be strong enough to support his weight. That's a scientific fact. Unless he's got some kind of servo strength boosters in his costume.
Yeah. And
then it becomes more like Iron Man. That raises a whole other question now. If Iron Man can do what he does, why isn't Batman... gotten a lot more, even more dependent on technology? If he's such a super genius, Batman would be different today than he was when he was created.
Yeah.
The problem with Batman is that he's still a holdover from the 40s. He's like a Zorro-type character. But if he's a billionaire and he's a super genius and he's really driven, then why doesn't he have even greater technology?
Well, just I know they've used it in the past. I don't know how often, but they've got the heads-up technology in his lenses and his cowl.
Right.
But they don't use it a lot, at least that I've seen. And I mean that stuff's real. They had the girlfriend of the CEO of Google just appeared at I think the Oscars or Oscar after party, and she had Google glasses on, and it's straight up HUD technology where she search for it, it pops up right on her lenses, and we've got that stuff now. Why does
stuff is going? It's interesting. Technology is a two-edged sword in so many ways, in so many senses. But with superheroes, it is. Eventually, a mask, it's already the fact that a mask like Batman wears would not be able to conceal his identity. The whole idea of Batman wearing a costume and drawing attention to himself by wearing an outlandish costume because it supposedly strikes terror into his enemies, it would do more harm to his purpose than good. If it worked to scare anybody, only startle them for a few seconds, they're going to shoot at you anyway.
Yeah.
And mainly, it draws attention to him. If Batman were real, if you were really going to be realistic about it, he wouldn't wear a costume.
No, not at all.
He would be the unknown guy walking down the street, and very effective. He might not even appear. He'd be more like a computer hacker, probably,
or a human target kind of character with that changes his appearance.
As an adult, one of the things that started bothering me is about the Batman concept is that he's constantly focusing on street thugs and maybe some city crime. But what about the real problems of the world? I mean, there are some massive evil characters running our world, and Batman doesn't pursue them. Frank Miller was thinking about having him go chase down Saddam Hussein, but what about the characters in our own country?
Yeah.
What about the most powerful people across the globe? And
they show him, being basically...
He would take on Galactus and probably win. Why doesn't he cure our world here?
Yeah.
But, that just illustrates how this stuff is pure fantasy.
Well, even with Batman, though, they show him being patched into every computer network. He's already in the government systems. He's already, in all the police files and all that. And like he could, wow. So you're right. Like there's so many other things he could address if he wanted to, with very little effort. From the Batcave alone,
Right.
he could handle a lot of stuff if he wanted to. And I guess that brings up the problem of, how much can he do, and what are his limits, and where does he focus?
That's the problem with Batman. He skirts the edge of fantasy and realism. He purports to be, or appears to be, like the most realistic of the superheroes. But if you take that too far, it only shows how absurd it is and how unrealistic it is.
Yeah.
It's hard for Batman because he doesn't have any superpowers inherent to his system. He can't deflect bullets off his skin. The Hulk movies and the Spider-Man movies even work better for me in general because they've got these superpowers, even though the basic premise of the superpowers is quite absurd. If you only take the single premise, the rest of it seems to hold together a lot better. With Batman, you got the constant question of how is he still surviving? I mean, with all the, he doesn't use a gun.
Yeah.
The Batmobile leaping from rooftop to rooftop, copters on his ass, and he still gets away. It's like Star Wars with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker in the Death Star, and they keep shooting, and they're killing off all these guys. Or any good Western, they're killing off all the bad guys, but they never get shot. And if shot, they're only winged or wounded.
Like the G.I. Joe cartoons for years, those red and blue lasers that they shot instead of bullets. Like no one got killed. Now the comics, that was different. Larry Hama's comics, people got killed left and right. But in the show, they sure ran through a lot of ammunition for nobody ever getting hit, man.
Batman's facing that problem all the time, and that's probably the underlying motivation that gave Grant Morrison the idea to have Batman Incorporated, where there'd be a lot of Batman.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea because it takes away from the uniqueness of Batman, but you gotta admit it's a more realistic view. If Batman were really to exist, it's ridiculous to even say that. But if Batman were to really exist, he would have to be more than one guy. It reminds me of a story, a Flash story, told back in 1973 or so that I read. It was about a computer that the scientists had created to solve problems and analyze problems and come up with the answers. And when asked about the Flash, the computer deduced that the Flash couldn't be one man. He would have to be a whole bunch of guys. And then the computer found out that it was wrong. And he was afraid that the scientists would take it apart. So he created, using some kind of unknown technology, this is just a bunch of hand-waving back in the 70s. Somehow the computer created out of the Flash's after images 7 other Flashes that were identical.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it's a great story, but of course it's completely absurd.
Oh, yeah.
Do that. I don't even remember how they glossed over that fact. But, because it was just a computer. It's not God.
Yeah.
But, that's the question. If you had Batman, he was doing all these things, and he didn't use a gun, and he wasn't arrested, and he wasn't shot, you'd have to wonder if Batman had already died. It's like with, not Saddam Hussein, but the other guy, Bin Laden.
Yeah.
He could very well have been killed many years ago because some of the guys in those videotapes sure didn't look like him, or at least one of them looked like a fake Hussein or Bin Laden. I could swear it was not the same guy. Yeah. I don't know why that jumped in my mind, but but that's the point. With Batman, he wouldn't last long. Couldn't last long. So if you're trying to make him realistic, you're fighting yourself. It's like trying to climb an ice mountain. If you get any handholds, you're always in danger at every second of slipping all the way back down into absurdity.
Yeah. Well, it's like, but see, you tend to find more people that will take the Batman mythos as is and without question. And comics fans, how they are, they'll pick at things, but they will take Batman without question, but they'll be the first ones to ask why the Hulk's purple pants never tear off of him when he goes from Bruce Banner to the Hulk. And it's like, that's your question? That's your disbelief is Hulk pants and not the fact that billionaire Bruce Wayne, who is probably heavily photographed and heavily recorded and everything else, has never been pegged as Batman, or that,
Superman with the glasses.
Yeah. It's amazing what we'll take and run with and what we'll completely ignore, or fans in general, I guess. So.
When it comes to comics and traditional American comics, basically superhero comics, there's a constant grading between childhood fantasies and harsh reality. You know, I mean, I love comics mainly because I like the art and I like to draw them, but I love them for nostalgia because when I was a kid, I still retain the feeling of fantasizing about how it would be to be Batman. Just the idea of, I mean, I remember even into my teens, well into my teens, up to around 20 or older, I would go into a city or go downtown and see the lights and see the dark rooftops and imagine a guy up there in a Batman costume being able to just swing down on a rope and take somebody out. It's ridiculous, and I really was still getting fired up about it. But, you know, that's the holdovers from childhood.
But it's also, like, it's one of those things where you can think of with Batman, like, he just, yeah, sure, he's rich, but what if I could go out and train? I could go out and train and learn this stuff. I could do that, you know?
Definitely.
With the Hulk or whatever, I'm not going to run out to a gamma bomb test and you know, take my chances. But with Batman, you're like, I can train. I can go to the gym. I could. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who would probably take that risk, but, you know.
Well, I guess I experience the same thing that every other fan does whenever a big change comes to one of these characters as an attempt by the companies to keep them alive in the market. I fear the loss of the innocence of the earlier version. You know, Batman swinging through Gotham City constantly. The more realistic you make him, eventually he's not going to be the Batman that we used to know. He might still be the same Batman in name or maybe even costume, but how far can you take it before you eliminate something essential?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a good question. And I suppose the human mind is a lot more flexible than I'm giving it credit for. In fact, I know it is. It's just that the question is really for me.
Yeah.
How far can Batman be changed and me still consider him to be my Batman?
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's why that they're so. One of the things they've held on to over the years, even like, you know, is the Batman doesn't kill, the Batman doesn't use a gun. And you got to wonder if one of the reasons why they've never allowed that is because if that does happen, if they do break that and cross that line, is that going to cause people to give up on it? Is that going to cause people to go, no, you've went too far, I can no longer, you know?
Actually, I think it would increase his market viability because a lot of these young fans, they want to see Batman killing. And in fact, even in the first 1989 Batman film, he killed readily. Remember when he drove the Batmobile by remote control into the Joker's chemical factory using as a hideout? All those guys, all of his henchmen were around it at very close range, shooting at it, and it dropped a bomb and drove away. And behind the Batmobile, it's a huge explosion. I mean, he killed all those guys. And then, during the Joker's... You didn't ask me about the earlier film. You just asked me about Brad Nolan. But during the Joker's parade, when he was giving away all the free money and he was going to gas them all, the bat plane comes out of the sky and starts shooting with machine guns at the Joker and characters. And let's say that even if they're rubber bullets, they could do real damage. They could put out eyes. They could still kill people because the velocity of the bat plane is added to the velocity of the bullets. I don't know if that really makes much difference, but the fact that he was shooting at a crowded street, sure, the Joker's parade is in the center, but it's lined with all these people. There's going to be ricochets. He can't be such a good shot that he could ensure that he wouldn't be shooting people.
If you hit an elderly man or a small child in the throat with a rubber bullet, they're probably not going to make it. You know?
So it's already been broached. It was broached in the first modern Batman film, and you didn't hear a lot of people complaining about it.
Well, in the original Bob Kane, Bill Finger Batman books, you know, he killed. He used a gun sometimes. I remember one panel in specific. I like to go back and read a lot of the Golden Age stuff. You know, there's a scene where a guy's leaning out of a window and Batman jumps on him from above and basically snaps his neck right on the windowsill. Like, you know, Batman wasn't afraid to kill at the beginning.
But yeah, using a gun. When he starts using a gun, then he's got all this money and all this technology, and it's effective. Why wouldn't he use bazookas? Why wouldn't he use the top of the line technology? And if you do that, then he's not really Batman anymore. He's like Punisher in a Batman costume.
Yeah.
So it's a really fine line that these characters are treading.
Yeah. That's why I think they should do more Elseworld stuff. Like, you know, for the people that want that, it's there. You know, do an Old West Batman would be great. Like I don't remember what kind of if there were any killing in your Holy Terror book. Did he actually kill in Holy Terror?
No,
he did not. Okay.
No, he was a priest.
Oh, that's right. He was. Yeah. But nowadays though, when people think priest, they're
they punching people in the face though, which is odd.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if we even really showed that. He just was a menacing figure, and it's been a while since I actually even looked at the story. He must have punched somebody.
I'm sure he did.
Maybe after he punched him, he turned his cheek.
All right, Norm, we're hitting right about 2 hours, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We've kept you a long time. We really appreciate it, man. It was an awesome conversation. I've had a blast. I think our listeners are going to really enjoy it, and we really appreciate you giving our tiny little podcast 2 hours of your time. That's pretty awesome.
They will enjoy it more than me, because whenever I hear my own voice on a recording, it's like, wow. I should hear it more often and get used to it, because I sound like my brother. And not in a good way.
Well, again, we thank you. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime if you'd like to come back. We would love to talk to you some more. Maybe get my other co-hosts on here to talk a little bit.
That'd be fine. I really enjoyed this, so yeah, I'd like to do it again.
Awesome. We'll keep up with you. We'll probably have this. I'm not sure if we're going to post it this weekend or not. We got to edit a little bit, but it'll be posted by early next week at the latest. And I will link it up on Facebook. And are you on Twitter?
No,
you're not on Twitter. Okay, but I will link it on our Facebook page to your Facebook and all that good stuff. And we'd appreciate it if you threw it up there also. Let your fans know about it. So,
I will.
All right. Thank you very much, Norm. We had a great time. I really appreciate it, man.
Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.